Hello, everyone. My name is Eric D'Souza, and you're joining me today for another episode of Crime Riser Canada's podcast, where we discuss all things crime fiction from authors from coast to coast. Joining me today is Catherine Astolfo. Hi, Catherine. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks.
Catherine is joining us today because her short story, Farmer Knudson, from the Auntie Beers, a book of connected short stories published by Carrick Publishing, has been nominated for the Best Short Story for 2025. Uh, for those of you who don't know Catherine, she's an award-winning writer of short stories and the author of 7 novels and 2 novellas. Catherine won the Arthur Ellis, which was the previous name for the Awards of Excellence, for Best Crime Short Story in 2012 for What Kelly Did, and again in 2018 for The Outlier, which is included in the Mesdames of and Messieurs Mayhem Mystery Anthology 13 Claws. Catherine's most recent book is Auntie Beers. With an historical twist and a quite different from her other novels, this one is a collection of connected short stories, again published by Carrick Publishing. Catherine didn't include this, but I added it to her bio. She is a Derrick Murdoch Award winner for her service for crime writers in Canada and a past president. But let's start with Auntie Beers. So it's a collection of short stories based mainly on tales told by Catherine by her mom and uncle. According to Ginger Bolton, the author of Deputy Donut Mysteries, she said it's reminiscent of Alice Munro. Very high praise. The stories are heart-wrenching, authentic, and luminous. So what could you tell us about the project as a whole?
I started it quite a long time ago. I always wanted to put my mother's stories in some form or other, either a novel or, and I decided on a series of short stories so that I could speak with a whole lot of different voices. Um, a lot of what my uncle said, what my mother said about their experiences as Irish immigrants, but then also they told the stories of their parents and their life in Ireland itself before they immigrated here. But I so it's taken me probably years to put that book together in the format that it ended up in. And of course, I had to have a mystery in there too, because and it had to have crimes. And so some of the stories that my mother told me were sort of uh, softer than I ended up I ended up putting in my book. And I did a lot of research. There was a long time there where I just all I did was read books on Ireland and the Irish immigrants in Canada, especially when they a lot of them came and then hit the Depression. The stories are pretty grim. Well, some of them are just horrible. So I had to include some of the darker aspects of it because that's just the way I roll when I write. So
I have to admit, I don't have any Irish background in me. My wife's Ukrainian, so I know sort of the Ukrainians and the hardship that the Ukrainians went through.
yeah,
Uh, I guess mostly in 30s and 40s of settling the prairies. What is the Irish story?
I think it's similar. In my opinion, we as a species are not very nice to one another. Been throughout history, and we're continuing to do the same thing. So I think it's very similar to any European uh, experience of coming over to Canada and then ending up in the midst of the Depression. It's probably similar. The Irish experience is probably similar to anybody who any of the people who were here already, and certainly has parallels with the indigenous people as well, um, because the bad things that people do to one another, the horrible things we do to one another, it keeps being repeated, and so I think human experience is very similar wherever you come from. The one maybe a twist a bit in my family's history at least was that they ended up coming to a part of Ontario that was very Protestant and very anti-Catholic, and they were Irish Catholic. So there was that added in. But I think it's very similar to any human experience that wherever you're from, whether you're, and certainly, um, the Irish eventually were able to meld in with the rest of the society in Southern Ontario because they were white, and so it wasn't as visible. And if you lost your accent, you could kind of um, just become one of the many people around in Southern Ontario because you looked like them and then began to talk like them. But I think it's comparable.
Um, again, I just read at this point last night, Farmer Knudson, almost expecting a happy story. I don't know why I went in thinking that, but that's not what happened. Um, I'll leave it to you to say what you want to say, but it's told from the point of view of a young girl, Kathleen, and there's plenty of hardship, as putting it very lightly. So I'll leave you to reveal what you want to reveal.
Yeah, it is a story about my mother, and it did happen to her. This assault, and it was a sexual assault, but it was not my mother. At least from what she told me, it was a lot less invasive than the story that I tell. I really can make anything worse. When I've heard a story, I can make it really dark. um, and that's what I did with this. It wasn't quite as I said, as bad. And I'm not making light of what happened to my mother either. That was certainly unacceptable and shouldn't have happened. But in the story, it's much more um, of a sexual assault and much more damaging to her than it, at least from what my mother told me, than it happened to her. So, but it is a story of perseverance too, because they were being mistreated constantly by the farmer who had hired my what would have been my grandfather. They were constantly being abused and kicked out when they were found out to be Catholic, and that kind of thing happened to them all the time. So that they never got ahead. They never had were able to build up any equity or anything like that. They were, put in shacks and they were made to work off their passage from Ireland and so on. So it was quite gruesome and quite difficult for them to live. So you can see the little girl sort of thinking, because he gives her little rewards. It's like, I can help my family by doing this. So you can see how the farmer kind of coerces her in a way. And that didn't really, my mother never told me that happened to her. So I just made that part up. But it would have been my grandmother, who was the mother in the story. She did take action with the farmer. So that actually was quite true. I'm not sure how much of it was true, and I'm not sure about the ending, whether that was actually did happen. I made that up too, but it was a kind of good story about a family who just, despite their circumstances, they're not going to be treated in such an abusive and an indignified way. Um, they hang on to their dignity, and they hang on to their beliefs, and they protect their daughter. They're not going to, in any way have something happen to her just because maybe they'd get a little extra milk and some eggs. That just wouldn't even occur to them. do that. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's, yeah,
it
there's,
definitely pulls on the heartstrings because you're, I think, let's say, very brave to tell it from Kathleen's point of view, and really portray the stigma that she feels, and then the reward that when she brings home the milk,
yeah,
like how happy her family is, and like obviously how poor they are, that this is
right.
such a treasure to them. Uh, so her situation was very, very difficult, and I read this about you, but I read it on your Amazon profile, so you probably wrote it yourself. But it says Catherine's stories are gritty yet portray gorgeous surroundings. They deal with sensitive social issues, but always include love and hope. They're not thrillers, but rather literary mysteries with loads of character and setting, and justice always prevails. And it's very true for Farmer Knudson. But at the same time, it's that last sentence that justice always prevails. It's like
Yeah,
these people, in a lot of ways, can't have justice, and
right.
they have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Um, so, do you feel like at the end of the story, justice prevailed?
Uh, Probably not at, if you just read Father Knudson, you, or Farmer Knudson, you, Freudian slip there. Uh, it didn't seem like justice, but um, when there's a connecting story about where they go from Farmer Knudson's property, and it turns out to be a far better situation, which it's funny enough, it's, I kind of lightened that one because for my mother that it wasn't a better situation, but in the book I gave them a little bit of a better ending. And they so they go to a better situation, so it, in that way, long term, it was, justice did prevail. Yeah, but I mean, the love and hope, I think, is very clear at the end, where that family circles around each other, and they don't care what's, in a sense, they're saying, we don't care what's going to happen to us. We are not going to put up with this, and they leave. So,
Mhm.
but they negotiate a much better circumstance, a much better situation.
Well, let's dig into your past a little bit. Um,
Oh,
you're mostly known for your short story writing, but you have done novellas and novels. You were also, uh, let's say a while ago, a principal. And if a young student came up to you and said, "I want to be a short story writer," what advice would you give them?
oh my goodness. You know what's really ironic is that I I love writing novels way more than I like writing short stories. I the short stories, yeah, obviously I do it well, but I think I would have to say to them, that I remember that quote, that a novel is like a marriage, and a a short story is like a date. Like you have to, it's like one is a long, and you have to really work at it, and the other one, it's kind of like, oh, this is fun, and it has a beginning and an end, and that's it. Um, but I would say that what you have to do is look at the economy of words and choose absolutely the right word to put next in the sentence, because every single word counts in a short story. You have to make sure that you're giving your readers the images and the thoughts and the feelings and the plot, but you have to do it in such a short time frame, that you can't waste any words. In a sense, you can't do as much describing of the setting, or do as much that of the conversation that might have taken place. But so you really need to focus on the words, and make sure that each sentence counts. Um, so I would say that sometimes, uh, if a young writer came and said, how can I write a short story? I would say start writing a long one, and then and then come back and start, cutting a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more until every sentence has weight in it. There's nothing wasted there. And that's about what I do.
Considering that Farmer Knudson is still fresh in my mind, I can see that worked right now, like from start to finish, the economy of every word. So
Yeah.
well done. Different
You.
audience we're speaking to now. Now you're going to be speaking to the CWC board and giving them advice. You were president in 2010, 2011,
Yeah.
back when we were having galas. We're
Yes.
considering having a gala for next year. It's a lot of work. It's expensive, but the payout seems to be worth it. What advice would you give us?
I would say go for it, and because I miss them, and I think they're absolutely worth it, and it certainly boosts our profile. I mean, people know that you're having a gala, and there can be a video of it, or there can be, there's so many ways of publicizing it, and everyone talks about it. So they talk about it in their circle, and you talk about it in your circle, and eventually it spreads even more about this Crime Writers of Canada Awards night. And I think there are ways of doing it that are not as extravagant or expensive. I think um, you can find places that are not as, that aren't hotels in downtown Toronto. You can maybe
Mhm.
find a place where the only thing is the airport. So people flying in from around the country. Uh, so, and same thing with Vancouver. When we had it there, we had it in Victoria actually. You had to have a hotel because, again, it was close to the airport and so on.
Mhm.
You can go east, and it's a little less expensive sometimes. Um, but to have it all around the country is fabulous. It's if you can do that, it's just usually quite difficult to find a place in the more rural settings. But and
Mhm.
then cities are near the airports, so you need those, but they're also expensive. So, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth looking around and saying, yeah, we could actually have it here. We could even provide maybe buses from the airport and it would save us so much money from a smaller town uh, hotel or something,
Mhm.
that it'd be worth it. So, but I do think the galas are worth it, and I loved when we had you know some kind of conference that coincided with it, so that people could spend a couple of days in the environment of writing and speaking to one another, and we worked really hard at that time, where our membership had dropped drastically in 2010, and it was a lot of work to get people to come back. And you don't want, one of the things is the awards, and one of the things was the conference, and those were all things that drew people to Crime Writers of Canada, to being a member. And there are lots of other things, of course, I know that,
Mhm.
but lots of other advantages that you get by being networked with Crime Writers of Canada. But the 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 gala would be, was certainly top of my list on things that I enjoyed, because you got to see and meet with the people that you'd either just heard about or just seen online or just read their books. You get to see them in person, talk to them, and it's a big thrill. Like William Deverell being given the Derrick Murdoch Award this year, I think is amazing. And that was one person that I was so happy to meet. When I went to Victoria, I was like, oh, I get to meet this guy whose books I've read, and I've just, really admired him for a long time. So that was the kind of thing that happened, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to make sure the board hears that.
Yeah, kind of long
Let's
rambling, but yeah, yeah.
the good sales pitch. I always like to ask what you're working on now. Is it a short story? Going back to novels? Is it going to be a
Yeah,
date or a marriage?
yeah, it's gonna be a marriage. I wrote a book called The Grand Art of Murder, which involved a a young, fairly young woman, and her mother is her ghost. And there, of course, there are murders and so on and so forth. But I kept it. It was kind of light. It was very different from most of my writing, and
Mhm.
I enjoyed writing it. So this one, I'm got several titles that I'm considering, so I'm not really sure, but it's going to be a grand something because I based it in Brantford, which is where I live, and the
Mhm.
Grand River. So I love the Grand River, and I've also met or I've talked to the Snipe team, which is the Six Nations investigating paranormal experiences, and I'm hoping they will agree to give me some tips on how I handle the ghost of her mother. So yeah,
That is very interesting research.
yes, very.
All right,
That's
Kathy.
fun.
I think every person in your category is a member of Crime Writers of Canada this year, which is fantastic. Uh,
Yay!
I don't know who won, so I'm wishing all of you equal amount of good luck. So thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for this.